Welcome to Tracy Aaron Talks, a podcast about all things health, wellness, mindset, and motherhood, my favorite topics. Well, and tacos. Let's talk about those too. Join me for an honest conversation as we muse and amuse ourselves, where nothing is off the table and what we're after is an exponential personal growth curve. Most days you'll find a really warm hug, and on some days, a swift kick in the reality pants. This is not a look at me, but a come with me conversation where we will take a real life look at health and wellness topics such as hormones, fatigue, mood swings, brain fog, toxicity, mold illness, the healing journey, and so much more. Mindset. It's a highly underutilized tool on any journey. Knowing that our inner world creates the environment of our outer world, we'll talk about what holds us back from living the lives we know we were meant to live. Motherhood will forever be my most profound and satisfying life's work. As a homeschooling mom of 5 kids, I've been there, done that, and got the t-shirt. I love chatting about the practicalities of managing a home, shepherding hearts, and how to create a family culture that you're proud of, and how not to lose yourself in the process. My mission is to transform women's lives by balancing their hormones so they can get out of survival mode and feel like themselves again. If you're looking for your new health BFF who has the curiosity to ask the big questions, the determination to find the answers, and the ability to find humor in it all, you are in the right place. Thank you for joining me today on My Story Part 2. I encourage you, if you're beginning here, to go back just to the first episode so that you can start at the beginning of my health journey. It will give you a better idea about what I am about to explain here in My Story Part 2. So where did I leave off? I left off that I eventually, after trying so many things and not making any progress and not getting anywhere, I found something called functional medicine. I was actually searching online for a machine that a friend of mine was using, and it was supposed to regenerate your cells and increase the energy that your mitochondria could produce. And I was fascinated by this machine. It was one thing that I hadn't tried yet. So on their website, I ended up looking for locations, and sure enough, a town close to me popped up. And when I clicked on it, I found a doctor's office, actually a well-known doctor in functional medicine. And I could not believe it. Here I was traveling all over the country, seeking out the best doctors that I could turn up from my research. And here was a functional medicine doctor in my own town. How did I miss this? So here's one lesson that I learned that is an important lesson to learn, because I think we can tend to beat ourselves up over something like this. I knew that I needed to begin to look at my experience with chronic illness as a journey. There were going to be ups and downs. There were going to be lessons along the way. And I felt like I owed it to myself to see everything I did and tried as helpful in getting me one step closer to achieving my dream of being healthy again. It wouldn't serve me to be like, well, wish I hadn't done all of that. Here was this guy right under my nose. Boy, I wasted a whole lot of time and money over there. I didn't need to add any more guilt about all of this. So hindsight is always 20/20, right? And a belief that I bring into the world is that everyone is always doing their best with the info and tools that they have. So if I could tell you one thing, just don't beat yourself up over this. You only know what you know. So let's get back to the story. I found this functional medicine doctor right in my own town and realized maybe he would be able to help me, and I didn't have to spend so much time or money traveling to see doctors anymore. So I made an appointment with him, and it was actually difficult to get into. He was in the beginning stages of wrapping up his practice and specializing in something very unique that was very unfamiliar and not something that I needed. However, I think his staff took pity on my story and I was able to skirt my way in. And I was so glad to be working with him when I finally had that first appointment. After he heard my story, he knew we needed to go deep. I had been through too much. I had so many tests up to this point. I had done a whole lot of things and I still wasn't making any progress. So a superficial or a cursory view of things just wasn't going to cut it for me. And I was at that place where I was willing to do anything. So we worked together all in all for about 2 years. And he taught me a lot about how the body heals. In fact, the framework that I use now to help women heal is a lot like the one that I used with him to heal myself. But mine is a lot more streamlined, succinct, and less expensive. I have been able to narrow it down to the most potent things. So that's one thing that I really love to bring into my practice is this sense of I have tried all of those other things so that you don't have to. I've been able to get to the end and look back and say, if we just do these important things, wow, we can really move the needle quickly and completely. So I take that into my practice with women today, and I think they benefit a lot from my circumnavigation of the chronic illness world. And here's one of the biggest takeaways I learned after my 2 years of working with this functional medicine doctor. I quickly began to understand that if we get the foundations and the overall roadmap right, you can actually turn yourself around rather quickly. And it's simply because the body loves balance and the body loves homeostasis. The body is always looking for that equal ground. And once I began to apply that to all of the different body systems, I began to move the needle in the way that I felt every day. And I began to improve. So, slowly but surely, by working on my nervous system first, getting me out of that fight or flight sympathetic mode, I was able to communicate safety to my body. And let me tell you, this was much more than deep breathing or following some guided meditation. All those things can be very, very important. It took a tremendous amount of mindset work. I felt like crap every day, but I was telling my body every single day with my mind that I was healing. It became like a mantra. Every day, in every way, I am getting better. Sometimes healing is like a muscle and you have to flex it to watch it grow. So when my HPA axis, the HPA axis is short for hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. And it's one of the main dominant biofeedback loops in our body, and it helps us control the stress response. It's also in charge of our metabolic hormones and our sex hormones like estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. I learned that if this one thing is out of whack, everything downstream will suffer for it. So starting upstream and starting at what's called a root cause approach, I was able to communicate that level of safety and stability to the HPA axis through certain lifestyle things, through nutraceuticals, through some supplements, and that began to lower the overall stress load in my body. And that meant that my body could now focus on something else since it was no longer in that survival mode. I could begin to detoxify. And then finally, I could tweak my symptoms with some hormonal support and a whole lot of lifestyle medicine along the way. I began to own the truth that what got me here won't get me there. I knew that I was going to need to change, like fundamentally. I knew that health wasn't found in a pill, even if it's a supplement, and that I was going to need to use the best of everything in order to be holistic in my approach to health. So I had great joy to watch that chart of mine that I used to record all of my symptoms from 1 to 10 in severity every single day, I found great joy to watch that chart of mine go from bad days every single day to more and more good days, until eventually I was having so many good days in a row, I honestly began to forget what a bad day felt like. The body's funny like that, right? I mean, it must be God's grace, or else who would ever go through childbirth more than once, right? It's so funny how we can forget even the darkest moments. And because I know some of you are still in the trenches and you want to know what types of actual things I did, I'm going to share with you this non-exhaustive list in no particular order. I just have them come to mind as I feel like, man, I tried it all. And I'm sure that there are some that I'm forgetting, but let's go through them now. Lots of ozone IVs, sauna use, cold plunges, sleep tests, and tweaking the amount of deep sleep and REM sleep that I was getting. Movement. I knew I had to move my body. And like I said in part 1, that I was still doing CrossFit and competitive swimming regularly. So I definitely had that movement piece down. IV vitamin C was a huge part of my healing journey. Neurofeedback. Oh, I did months of neurofeedback. Lymph drainage. I would get inside of a suit that would zip up and it would try to move the lymph from my ankles all the way up to the center of my body, the heart center and the abdomen, just to move my lymph around. I did lots of muscle testing with various providers, parasite cleansing, mold detoxes, herbals and homeopathics for stealth infections, things like Lyme, EBV, strep, staph, numerous co-infections by name. I bought a biomat. I found providers that had Beamer mats. I tried acupuncture. I tried NUCA chiropractic work and regular chiropractic work. I tried loads of nutrition therapy. I tried repairing the HPA axis, specifically targeting that with nutraceuticals. I reversed insulin resistance through nutrition and some fasting. I worked specifically on cellular and mitochondrial repair. Eventually, I did a lot of hormone balancing work, but the most important thing that I think was a common thread through it all was what I like to call transformational thinking. So much deep work had to happen on my mindset. And speaking about the mindset, let's talk for a second about the stress of chronic illness in terms of how expensive it is. Financial stress is something that I feel like doesn't get brought up that often, but if you're going through anything similar to what I went through, you might feel the pains of wondering, should I do this treatment? Should I do this therapy? Can I afford it? How much will it cost? And needing to make decisions based on that can be very, very stressful. Feeling like you're stuck, feeling like you simply can't afford to get well. So that I experienced all of that. And the thing that drove me is I knew deep down my family, they needed a mom who could function again. But it was so expensive. Now, thankfully, I used something called Samaritan Ministries to help me. But a lot of the traveling and some of the alternative therapies just weren't covered, and I had to pay out of pocket. And when I was done with it all, when I looked back over the course of 5 years, I know I probably could have bought a house outright. The debt that we racked up just made me sick to my stomach. And it added to the overall angst of feeling sick and not knowing why. Like, how many things would I have to try? Thankfully, my husband trusted me. And though sometimes he asked if something that I was doing was truly necessary, he would just look at me and see the look of desperation in my eyes. And I had his undying support. And I am so grateful for that. I lived out that truth of your health is your wealth. I mean, I previously had taken care of myself, but I never could appreciate the daily vibrancy I felt until all of that was taken away from me. I resonated deeply with that quote, "A healthy person has many dreams, but a sick person has one." That was me. I just wanted to be better. I understood, deeply, that to lose your health is to lose everything. So it's all still a little bit of a mystery, but what did healing look like for me? It was kind of like some ups and some downs, some mountains and valleys. It was, the best way I can describe it, is a gradual reduction in symptoms until they completely disappeared. I know, it sounds so not sexy, but that's the truth. Eventually, I just simply had more good days than bad days, and my good days started to string together until one day, if I had symptoms that I charted, it was actually a surprise. When I was more well than I was sick, here's what happened. I began to collect the evidence for my brain that I had healed, right? I began to realize, no, I'm better. I'm better today than I was yesterday. Look how many good days I've had in a row. And I would use it as evidence. And I would tell my brain, repeat it to myself, that all day, every day, I was well, that I had recovered, that all my bad days were behind me. And this doesn't mean that I didn't have any setbacks, but this really was the beginning of me starting to come to the other side of this valley and be able to look back with some clear thinking and say, wow, I truly believe the worst is behind me. So in summer of 2020, I seemed to emerge from my cocoon of chronic illness, and I found my health again. When I was sick, I remember praying, if you would only make me well, I promise I'll spend the rest of my days helping women just like me recover their health. And interestingly, after I was able to recover my health, he led me to the Institute for Integrative Health Practitioners. I found it through a podcast that I was listening to. And then I realized this is exactly the path that I could take to put my previous nursing experience and license into practice and help women just like me. So that became the catalyst for my training, and my interest then just grew from there in functional medicine. I continued to take online courses in functional medicine and began with a specialty in women's health because I really felt like if I can spare anyone from traversing the depths that I did, I truly wanted to. So next, I'm going to tell you what I learned from my health journey and what my most important lessons were. And some of them might surprise you. So stay tuned for part 3. Thank you for joining me today on Tracy Aaron Talks. I hope you found today's episode enriching to your life. If you enjoyed today's content, would you consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving a review? That simple act helps this podcast get into the hands and ears of many more women just like you. Remember, anything you want and do not yet have will require a new set of beliefs, thoughts, actions, and a new you. I am honored to be on this journey with you as we wholeheartedly pursue true health and wellness in mind, body, and soul.